Hello from Beijing. Thanks for joining me again. So I'm here in Beijing for the next 4 weeks teaching a U.S. history class in high school, rest of my summer vacation. And coming to Beijing is interesting for me because now that I've been in China for 3 years and my Chinese language level has progressed, not as much as I'd like, but to the point where I have what I would say is, it's fair to say, survival Chinese. I can get by day to day on my own. I can look up words I need to look up. I can speak to people about simple things that I need. So very, very basic beginner level of language. One of the nice things about Beijing is that the people here really do actually speak Chinese. Where I live in China, in Chengdu, people speak a dialect, which is very hard to understand even for speakers of regular standard Chinese. They don't really understand the Chengdu dialect all that well. And so here I'm delighted that I can talk to people and not have a problem understanding usually what they're saying. They have a bit of a patois, Beijing patois, a lot of R, and, but I talk like pirates, but I can still understand them. So it got me thinking that I should probably make a video about Chinese. Now, the first thing I want to say is this is not a language instruction video by any stretch. I am not qualified to teach you even basic Chinese. But that's not what I'm going to do here. This is more of a video for folks who are thinking about moving to China but are nervous because they've heard what I heard and what everybody hears is that Chinese is the most difficult language for English speakers to learn. Now, Chinese people will tell you, oh, Chinese is so easy. I always say that. Sorry, it's difficult. See, it is difficult. The truth is it's not hard to speak a very basic level of Chinese. So when we think of English, and I teach English part-time, English is a hard language to learn. The spelling and pronunciation rules are extremely difficult. Our grammar is absolutely out of control. It's a hard language to learn. So when someone does speak English well and it's not their native language, they've worked really hard at it. You should understand that. Chinese, on the other hand, is likewise very difficult to master, but at its most basic level, the survival level of Chinese that you need to survive in China day to day and have basic conversations, it's actually not that hard. And so I'm going to try to convince you of that today. I've watched a lot of language videos. I've watched videos before I came to China. I took like a video class online. And I'm always amazed at how the stuff that's presented in a video format of like, this is your introduction to Chinese, it basically follows standard language instruction, which is greetings and how to talk about your job. And like, that's not important. Like, that stuff is not going to help you survive day to day. Learning how to properly greet people, great. Ni hao, that's how you greet people in Chinese. It's totally fine. So I'm going to give you a couple of basic examples of what I'm talking about. And if you can master these concepts, and again, I'm not going to teach these concepts. I'm just going to say, like, this is the stuff that, like, all you need to know in order to survive day to day here. The first thing about Chinese is that when computers started to become common in China, there was a discussion about, well, how do we, as Chinese people, how do we type on a keyboard? How do we put our language, which is akin to Egyptian hieroglyphics, meaning it's pictorial. Each word is a picture, each syllable is a picture, which you probably know. How do you put that into a computer? So one of the ideas that was floated was that we'll draw on our computer, and then the computer will recognize the character, and then boom. And that's actually how smartphones, one of the ways you can input Chinese characters is that way, but it's really cumbersome, and the computers don't always read what you're writing very well if your handwriting's not too good. So that was abandoned, and instead, the Chinese developed what's called Pinyin, which is the transcription of the sounds of Chinese into, or using a Latin alphabet. And so I'm going to show you. People always wonder, how do I talk to people on my cell phone? So it's actually fairly easy to type in Chinese on a cell phone or a computer. I'm going to demonstrate on my Mac here. So for your Mac, you can add keyboards, and so I have added a Pinyin simplified keyboard to my computer, so I just put it right there. You can do this on your iPhone as well, and presumably on Android devices. I don't know why anyone would use an Android device, but if you happen to be one of those people who doesn't mind exploding phones, sorry, whatever. You can do it there too. Find a YouTube video to show you how. So the way a Pinyin keyboard works is you simply type the Pinyin. So in this case, ni, right? How. And there's some predictive software that says, well, what could you be saying? Number one is ni hao. Number two is prediction ni hao ma, which is something people don't really say. And then number three is ni hao as well, but that's a different hao, which is number. So it's kind of a weird prediction, but the most common would be one, and there you go. So if I'm talking to a friend and I want to say, what are you doing? And I want to type to them on my phone, I can type ni zai, which means you doing, 做什么? 你在做什么? And I don't have to put a question mark in there, but Chinese people generally will. And there you go. So the Chinese language has very few sounds in it compared to English. So one character can represent many, many sounds, right? So sort of, I meant to say one sound can represent many different characters. So for example, shang, right? This shows you the most common, which is on top of, right, or above, which is that first character. And so pretty much if you type shang, you mean that. And then if I open that up, these are all the characters in Chinese that are represented by that sound, shang, all the different tones. And so if I'm not quite sure what I want to say, I'm not quite sure what character, I can look down there. So you do obviously have to know Chinese characters in order to do this. But actually, the truth is, knowing the few hundred most common characters in Chinese, you can type on your phone to your friends or your coworkers simple things. Fairly easy, again, if you recognize a few characters. So that's how we do it. It's how Chinese people do it. It's not that we have a keyboard here in China with 10,000 characters on it or something like that. The pattern recognition that I mentioned, where you can like draw the character on your phone, you find generally older people use that on their cell phones. Grandma and grandpa who never learned Pinyin tend to use it because Pinyin was only invented after computers came around. So again, folks who were in their 70s or 80s never learned it. Today, students learn Pinyin in school because it's such a necessary part of writing in Chinese today. Okay, so now you can sort of understand how we can type Chinese on a computer keyboard, and you understand there's this Pinyin. So there's an older style of transcription of Chinese sounds into English, but that was created by the British. It's called Wade Gillis, and no offense to the English, but it's pretty bad. It doesn't really capture the sounds correctly, and the rules are not distinct. Wade Gillis, the people who compiled it were mostly dealing with Southern Chinese people speaking Guangdonghua, and so they were simulating that language, which is a different language than Mandarin, which is what is the Chinese national language today. So the older transcriptions where you'll see like a TS and things like that, that's useless. And so don't look at anything with Wade Gillis in it at all. Instead, focus on Pinyin, which is what the Chinese created to capture these sounds. So my point here is that Pinyin pronunciation is extremely easy to learn. The letters don't always stand for the same things they stand for in English. So, for example, the Q, people don't know what to do with the Q. The Q is a qi sound, not a Q sound. An X is a kind of like an SH, but there is an SH in Chinese, like Shao or Xiao, right? So it's like Xiao sound, right? Xie xie, thank you. Should learn to master that sound. ZH, for example, is not Zhang or Z, it's Zh. And so there are some different sounds that you have to master, and that's maybe one of the hardest things for some people. But there's no irregularities in pronunciation. When you see something spelled out in Pinyin, that's how it sounds. And there's no guesswork involved, which is great. The other thing about Chinese that's good is that Chinese is actually a sound-poor language. There's not a lot of actual sounds in Chinese. There's something like 435. There's thousands of sounds in English, depending on the combination of letters. But Chinese only has a few hundred sounds, and so again, it makes it pretty easy to master the phonemes and the morphemes of Chinese, the sounds of the language. Second point is you're going to hear a lot of conflicting information online. In writing about tones, Chinese, like many Asian languages, is what's called a tonal language. English is not a tonal language. There are 4 tones in Chinese and a 5th tone if you include no tone at all. So every syllable, every word in Chinese, or every syllable really, has a tone associated with it, 1 through 4. And a lot of foreigners will tell you, who've lived in China for a while, they'll either tell you, A, my tones are shit, and it doesn't matter, people still understand me. Or B, they'll tell you, my tones are shit, and that makes it hard for people to understand me. The second's true. Anyone who tells you that tones in Chinese don't matter is frankly full of crap, and they don't speak very good Chinese, and people are constantly confused as to what the hell they're talking about. Because, as I mentioned, Chinese is a sound-poor language. So, for example, if you take the example of the character from Ma, right? This is everybody's favorite. So Ma in the first tone, Ma means mother. Mama means mother. Mom. In the second tone, Ma can mean toad. So, trying to call your mother, calling her toad is not polite. In the third tone, which is the bouncing tone, or a low tone, actually, Ma, it's horse. And fourth tone, Ma, can be many things, including headboard to a bed. So it's a pretty common explanation of how tones work. So in context, if you're at IKEA trying to buy a bed and you say Ma, they know you don't mean horse. They know you probably mean the headboard. But out of context, it's extremely confusing for native speakers of Chinese. So they're not too difficult, and you do have to learn to use them. And a lot of that can be sort of like memory and mouth memory. Common words you'll learn the tones for, and you'll be able to use them effectively. So you'll hear the sound of the language, and so you'll be able to say things in Chinese effectively with using tones. All right. So other things you need to know. You need to be able to say this and that. So like this and that. Very, very important. So, for example, that is na. Right, so like that thing, that one, naga. Right, so point of naga. It's important to say that. Which one? Naga. Right? This, zhiga, right, this. And so if you point to something and just say zhiga, you're saying that one, right? And it's like basic, I'm just off the boat learning a language, this and that, right? Where, it's important to know how to say where, nali, right? Or nar, with a third tone. There is nar, right? Or nali, there. So there's where the tones come in. The difference between a question and a statement is the tone. It's the same sound. So if you can master that, again, you can just point at stuff, and you can just say, "Jigga, jigga, jigga," that, and that's a very effective method of communication. Again, flip the coin and think about someone coming up to you and they don't speak English, but they point to something and say that. Well, obviously, okay, give them that, right? Like, pretty easy. One of the big things that you need to be able to do, you don't necessarily need to know a lot about what food is called. It's probably a good idea to learn the names of your favorite foods in Chinese as you figure out what those favorite foods are, so you can ask for them. Asking for things in Chinese is fairly simple. If you want to just ask for something, you say 我, which is me, I, and the word for want is 要. So 我要这个, I want that. But you don't really even, if you can add 我要, it makes it very clear what you mean. But again, it's 3 words, pretty easy. A lot of times when you go into a restaurant, you're going to need a menu, right? A lot of restaurants will have a picture menu. If you go into a Kentucky Fried Chicken or a McDonald's or a Burger King or a Subway, you'll want to see a picture. You can ask for a menu, which is, and this is one of those sounds, 菜单. So that means menu. And if the menu has pictures, so much the better. Well, you need that. One of the other things you need to learn for survival Chinese would be, we're talking about food. If you have any dietary restrictions, you should probably know how to say, like, pork, beef, chicken, fish, things like that. So if you can't have a particular food, you should definitely know what that food is called. So learning the names of different kinds of meat, good idea. Hot or cold is a very common question in Chinese, especially for drinks. Cold is, for a drink or ice, is bing. So if you want cold water, you need to ask for bing shui. If you're an American like me and a European and you want your beer cold, it's normally not cold, you need to know, to say bing pijiu, right? Cold beer. So they give you a cold one out of the cooler and not just take one off of the rack on the floor. How much is this, right? So you can hold something up, again, very simple, hold something up, 多少钱, how much money, right? Fairly easy. Numbers in Chinese are really, really easy to learn. You actually only have to learn 1 through 10. That's it, I swear. 1 through 10. And then 100, the word for 100, the word for 1,000, and the word for 10,000. So it's really easy. Here's your lesson. See, I'll give you a little bit of language instruction, not much. 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There you go. Sorry, 10. If you learn 1 through 10, you can do almost any number in Chinese. 100 is bai, and 1,000 is qian. And then in Chinese, they have 10,000, which is wan. So if you've got that, you can pretty much say any number in Chinese. So numbers are important both for understanding and for speaking. The other thing is like yes and no in Chinese. Bu is the particle fourth tone bu, which means no. So it can be, bu shuo, I don't speak, right? Bu shuo. So you put it in front of a verb to negate the verb. Yes in Chinese is shi. Shide usually means yes. People don't use it a lot. They usually just repeat the verb. But knowing like no And also a very common form of no or and yes in Chinese is have, not have. So if you were to ask someone, do you have coffee, right? 你有没有咖啡? And have is 有, and not have is 没有. So just that's very. If someone says 没有, it means no, like don't have it, get out of here. Not here, right? So again, just a few things that are pretty helpful. Moving on from my little bit of language instruction there, do you need to read Chinese? When I came to China, I decided I would not read Chinese. That was ridiculous. These are squiggly lines. I heard someone that I'm working with now say he's been here for 10 months. Oh, a bunch of squiggly lines. And I thought, yeah, he's definitely only been here 10 months. You do eventually need to learn to read Chinese. And China is a country of 1.4 billion people. I say that a lot. People say that a lot. There are a lot of very smart people in China. Very literate, very highly educated. At the same time, there's a lot of people in China who drop out of school before they hit high school. And there's a lot of people, working sort of manual labor, menial tasks that are, by American standards and Chinese standards, functionally illiterate. And they may only know a few hundred characters in Chinese. That's enough to get by. Right? That really is enough to get by. And so for someone to come to this country and with the commitment of living here, say, oh, I don't need to read Chinese. Yeah, you don't need to read Chinese poetry. You don't need to read a newspaper. But if you can learn a few hundred characters, that's putting you at the level of someone who has about a 5th or 6th grade education. And you can move up from there. And take it from me, the characters are not really that hard to learn. And so even starting with, a dozen characters and moving up to 20 or 30 to 100 to 200 or 300, you've got enough Chinese to understand like what a store is. This is a bus stop. Little things like that are fairly easy to do. That being said, a lot of important signs are in English, and that's a relatively new phenomenon in China, and you can thank the Olympics for that. The government decided to put all the signs in English and Chinese, and so official signs are in both languages. A lot of stores that might not cater to foreigners but have a Western flair to them have English as well. Unfortunately, most menus in most small restaurants are just in Chinese, and a lot of things are just in Chinese, but the street signs are in English, and that's big. Right? That being said, the reality of moving to China is that most people you encounter day to day either don't speak English or don't speak it well enough that they're going to want to speak to you in English. So even if they do have some English skills, they're not going to demonstrate them for you. So a lot of people may think, well, I don't want to move to China to teach or get a job because that language is going to be a huge barrier. And again, my main point here is that actually it's not as big of a barrier as you would think. And it's rather exciting also not to speak the language. But within a few weeks and a quick introductory course to Chinese for a few hundred RMB, you can easily be at a point where you feel comfortable doing very simple things here. So don't let the language dissuade you. And if you really are going to let it dissuade you, you can look at cities like Beijing or Shanghai that allow you to get along really without too much language skill. You're not really going to experience China if you come here and you refuse to learn the language, but you can live in Shanghai for years without speaking a word of Chinese, and parts of Beijing as well, without a problem. But you're not going to be able to travel anywhere. You're going to have a hard time making any friends with Chinese people. So, well worth the effort. And again, it's not the hardest language in the world. It is definitely the hardest language for an English speaker to master, but to speak it at a simple level is really not that challenging. So, as always, thanks for watching my videos. If you want to subscribe, I'll put it right there. Other videos in this series, right up there in the corner. I have some neat videos of my life in China and some stuff about anthropology right there. Thanks again. Have a great day.